Tonight on Open Line, we are talking about human trafficking and what that looks like in Tennessee. Margie Quin is my guest with End Slavery Tennessee. Margie, thank you for being with us once again. We've talked a lot over the last half hour about what trafficking is and working with victims. I want to hear more about what you're doing at End Slavery. You have big dreams, big plans.
Yeah, we do, and a lot of those dreams kind of came true this year. We got a call from the governor's office last February, and they asked us for kind of an analysis, a gap analysis of victim services in the area, and said, hey, can we get that back in 24 hours? so you know, I'm sort of used to, the state. That's how the state works, and so we did. We turned that around really fast, but we also gave them solutions. How do you solve these gaps, and how do you serve those individuals who may be hardest to serve, and who are not being served and are falling through the gaps? And so we returned that to them, and they said, hey, we love this plan. How much it's going to cost? And I really thought that's where we're going to get sort of the blink, but they didn't blink. And we were the very, very fortunate recipients of about $3.5 million. And what we're going to do with that is we've already spent a nice chunk of that. We've bought 35 acres in the greater Nashville area, 2 large structures already on the property. It will, more than double our capacity for housing survivors. We're also going to lengthen our programming from about 6 months to 2 years. We would like to build some small cottages on the property, not tiny houses, but cottages, and maybe you spend a year in the main house, and it's very intensive work. It's very intentional work on the complex trauma, and then you move out into the cottages. We're also going to be working in a pilot program with the governor's office, Thistle Farms, and ATI, and Viable, which is a Brentwood-based nonprofit, to set up a workforce development program. So we have identified businesses in the local area that would really like to work with survivors and employ survivors, do apprenticeships with survivors, because the key to long-term sustainability of recovery is good jobs, and it's good, safe, stable housing. And so providing that housing for 2 years, allowing them to live in a cottage. They could live for free if they're going to school or going to, in an apprenticeship. But they also, if they're working, they could pay $300 to $400 a month, say, in rent. We would hold that in a nest egg for them, and then return it to them in a year when they leave the property, having found hopefully good jobs and stable housing. We think that those sort of mini transitions in a safe space and a therapeutic environment on a campus that's really dedicated to clinical healing, that those are going to be safe transitions, because we see a lot of failure around transitions for survivors. It's the fear, it's the anxiety of the change. And so starting that process and learning that process, learning that End Slavery Tennessee is still going to support them, we think is going to be a recipe for success. And so that's what we want to do with adults. And in year 3, we would like to build the first 2 homes for juveniles, trafficked youth in the state of Tennessee, which is just very, very needed. We have kind of nothing between kind of level 4 secure facilities and foster care. And we need something kind of in the middle that's therapeutic, that's clinical, but that's home-based, and is not kind of a lockdown facility. We would call it like a staff secure facility. And so that's a big, big dream, is to build those homes for trafficked youth.
Yeah, I was reading a stat, and I've got to go back to it. Let's see. This is from tn.gov. Human trafficking, second fastest growing criminal industry behind drug trafficking. The average age of a child sold is just 13. So I wonder right now, without a home like that you guys are envisioning, if a 13 through 17-year-old becomes aware to law enforcement they're a human trafficking victim, what happens to them?
Yeah, it's less than ideal. They're either going into they're going back home, or they're going back into foster care, where they're running again, going back, running again, going back, running again. And then once they run so many times, they're going to be, pushed into like a level 4, lockdown facility. And because there's just nothing in between. And so we could use that level 2 as a step down. So somebody coming out of a level 4 psychiatric hospital or a level 4 detention center, or somebody that is really struggling. We've seen a couple of run incidents. Things are not going well at home. They sort of move up into a level 2, into a more structured environment, a more therapeutic and clinical environment, where they can process the trauma that's happened to them in a really safe, secure, structured environment.
Because once you get into one of these situations, whether you're 13 years old or even older, the criminal justice system, if you get pushed into that, it's just like a hamster wheel a lot of the times. It just goes round and round, and it is hard to get off that. Yeah.
Well, we've set up the criminal justice system to be punitive, and in some cases that's right. That's the right way to go. I would be disingenuous to sit here with 26 years in law enforcement and tell you that that I don't believe in some parts of the punitive system. But in other places where we can take a different approach, where we can utilize diversion courts, like the drug courts here in Davidson County, like Judge Anna Escobar's human trafficking court here in Davidson County, supported by the DA's office. That kind of approach to criminal justice is revolutionary, and it's a game changer for these folks. And the vast majority of the women, some 70% of the women coming through the Davidson County Cherished Hearts Court, they're not coming in for prostitution offenses. Again, we just said 64% fewer women are being charged with prostitution, but they're coming through the court with a history of prostitution or a history of commercial sexual exploitation, having been arrested for minor drug possession, shoplifting, theft, simple assault, really low-level crimes, D felonies or E felonies or A misdemeanors. But the ability to divert those women into services rather than incarceration, A, alleviates some issues in the criminal justice system, B, is a less punitive result. And so when you look at what it costs in Slavery, Tennessee to house and treat a human trafficking victim, it's about 1/3 of the cost of incarceration.
That's significant. And that should make taxpayers go, oh, what? Yeah, that sounds good.
So, if you thought, wow, $3.5 million, whoo, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But, year over year, when you say, if I can serve 20 women on that piece of property, that piece of property pays for itself in the reduction of incarceration costs. Many of these women that we're serving also have children that are in state's custody. That costs a lot of money too. So we're seeing, one of the big goals that a lot of these women come into us with is, I want my kids back, or I want my kid back. And so reunification becomes a significant goal for these women. And if they can work the program and stay clean and turn their lives around, then the state can have confidence that they can potentially return children to these women. And we're seeing that's happening as a result of our program. And again, that's a huge taxpayer savings as well.
Do these victims usually want help?
Yeah, some do and some don't. And the ones that tell you they don't, most tell you they don't out of fear. What we're selling seems too good to be true. And at some point in their lives, somebody sold them something that was too good to be true.
And look where they ended up.
And look where they ended up. And so even when they walk away, you still planted the seed. And when I was running the sting operations at TBI, about 15 to 20% of women that we made contact with that went ahead and walked out the door, because we always had, in Slavery in Middle Tennessee, we always had Grove Free in Knoxville or Restore Corps in Memphis. We had them on site in the hotel with us, and we took the women directly to them And about 30% left with the nonprofit, but about 15% in the weeks, after the sting, would call the nonprofit and say, "Is the offer still open? Can I come into services?" And so, we know that it's planting the seed, and they're thinking about it, that's the best we can do.
Yeah.
But also things like chairs, like for women who are going ahead and making it into the criminal justice system, diversion courts are a great way to identify women who've been exploited and give them another option.
I do want to talk about the punitive side of things, but that for the perpetrators, you and I were discussing during commercial break, back when I was a reporter, as I mentioned earlier, I'd watch these cases come through the court system, and these guys were out that very day, usually pled down, they paid some money, and it was, done. They could get back to life. They might face some more personal consequences at home, but how are we treating these perps now in our criminal justice system and after these sting operations?
So on the adult side, we increased the penalties. It went from a B misdemeanor to an A misdemeanor. But I would tell you that most of those men go to a class and then within a couple of months are getting their records expunged. Of course, that's not what's happening on the women's side. If they're arrested for an A or B felony trafficking case, which is they've tried to buy a minor, or they've come to the hotel with money knowing that they're going to buy a minor, those folks are, those are A felonies, and they can serve a significant amount of time. There was a law passed this last session in 2021 that made trafficking of children a predatory offense, which means if convicted, they're going to serve 100% of their time. Now, these offenders are most likely range 1 offenders. They have no prior criminal history, and so they're going to serve maybe a very short amount of time, 2-3 years, and then they're going to suspend the rest of the sentence. As long as they don't get rearrested, they're good to go. But if they've got significant criminal histories, then you could see a 12-15-year sentence on a trafficking charge.
Interesting. Okay, we have to take another quick break. We're going to wrap things up when we come back. If you do have a question, I do want to tell you it's not too late to give us a call. 615-737-PLUS. Stay with us.